Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ajay Tyagi, based out of Dallas, Texas, and I lead our solutions, transformation, and innovation at Movate. Have been with the company for about 2 years, and I have pleasure to have Bill from Forrester with me. Bill, you want to introduce quickly?
Oh, sure. Hi, Bill Martorelli with Forrester. I'm working on our infrastructure and operations role team, and I cover mainly managed services, including cloud managed services. So it's good to be with you today.
Thanks, Bill. So today, the topic of discussion is you know, SRE, site reliability engineering, how organizations can leverage the power of SRE, and especially with enterprises adopting cloud at aggressive pace, it actually sets the right foundation to adopt SRE, improve the velocity of digital transformation, and that's essentially the topic we wanted to cover today. How do you adopt and harness the power of cloud with SRE principles? So with that, let me ask Bill. So Bill, you see most enterprises are in some kind of a cloud journey.
That's
Uh,
right.
and and also, a lot of them call themselves as software driven, and hence, SRE becomes really crucial. So how do you see this whole SRE adoption playing out in this context today?
Well, I think it's playing out in a number of ways. I think you rightly point out that as companies get into their cloud journey, digital journey, some evolutions tend to occur, and SRE, has really emerged as a discipline of software engineering and operations to, help enterprises achieve greater scale, reliability, and velocity in their digital operations. But it's not just operations, right? It has significant implications in other ways, including development. And it is a funny thing, and we've seen this time and time again. And as people perhaps may think of the cloud initially or have historically as an infrastructure centric, but as they get into it, they find themselves being drawn up the stack, customers and service providers both. So we're seeing a lot of interest now. We just did a big report on managed cloud services, in which it's pretty clear that SRE has emerged as, you could argue, a de facto standard, quote unquote, for cloud operations. But again, not just limited to the operational aspect. As customers continue to struggle, I guess, with achieving end-to-end visibility and higher levels of reliability and availability, that they're really seeking in the cloud.
No, certainly, certainly. Yeah, and I think the way I see it as organizations become more and more product driven, the velocity of release has
That's
increased
right.
multifold, which means that you have to have right balance of speed and stability. And SRE is the answer to bridge that gap between the velocity of development and release cycles versus operations desire to keep environment stable. So I think it fits right well into this whole uh, speed of innovation era, if you will, right? So
Oh yeah, no question. And I think, we definitely see, I think you made a good point that we do see this interest in SRE, as part of a broader evolution, right, into product oriented thinking, along with, let's say, product and platform teaming structures, and, advanced use of tooling, including AI operations tools and others, in a way that at least can hopefully at least facilitate that end-to-end visibility. As the world continues to at least adjust, from the ITIL centric world that it knew, right, toward a more cloud centric world, and SRE is definitely part of that shift.
sure, no, certainly, and I also think that that there's a lot of also confusion in the market. Uh, Understanding what it really means. So any views you see what do you hear from customers?
Well, it's interesting. And I mentioned this report that we just wrote about managed cloud services, multi-cloud managed services, as a matter of fact. And I can tell you that the service providers are really helping to enable this shift in a number of ways, right? One, including, let's say, training and consulting and allowing or helping companies and enterprises to, let's say, embrace SRE on their own, right? But on the other hand, they're embracing SRE as a way to facilitate more efficient delivery of service, right? Which, and so SRE is becoming as a big factor in managed cloud services in that manner. But I think it's important for clients to, let's say, be mindful of the fact that, like anything, right? A lot of these IT initiatives we've seen in the past, you got to be careful about what under the covers, right? And simply citing the term SRE does not necessarily make it, exactly is what the Google engineers had envisioned when they. So a little caution and a little, let's say, concern about potential SRE washing, if you will,
Mhm.
is probably warranted. But at the same token, I wouldn't want, as we've seen too, the emphasis on pure semantic purity to let the perfect become an enemy of the good, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We've seen a bit of a revolution, I guess. Well, maybe that's putting it too aggressively, but I guess the idea is that we've seen a lot of enterprise customers over the years, right, rely very heavily on ITIL-based processes for maintaining operations and overall stability. And now here comes SRE, right, which you can argue is an enhancement, or and even though it's not really congruent in the sense that it's a direct replacement. I know there's a tendency sometimes for people to think, well, let's out with the old, in with the new. But in reality, it seems like these processes, you really can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I'm just curious, what's your take on that?
Yeah. It's an interesting question. See, the way ITIL evolved, the fundamental principle behind that was to provide a set of guidelines for leaders to be structured in IT service management. That was the goal. And the evolution, obviously, in ITIL v4, for example, was more around, hey, how do we take, let's say, a journey view, right? But still, it remains to be set of guidelines. In SRE, I think the most fundamental difference to me, at least, it brings accountability. So, for example, service level management, it brings this whole service level indicators, service level objectives, service level agreements. It links the entire value chain, to ensure that customers will get the desired service levels. And hence it brings that accountability. So essentially what you see is that it moves from, referring to a set of guiding principles to bringing a workable model with accountability, right from developer to operations, right? That's most fundamental. And you can apply that to even observability concepts, and also, this whole concept of resiliency by doing, these proactive tests, doing chaos engineering, running some chaos engineering use cases. So you are basically, ensuring that your fundamentals are in place, and you are improving the entire availability, avoiding those incidents. So essentially, it kind of complements. To me, it brings accountability. It becomes a little more prescriptive, and hence it really goes hand in hand, in my mind.
I like the way you put that. That
Yeah.
accountability is really critical.
Yep. How is it different than ITIL? ITIL v4 came in couple of years ago. Then there is, a confusion with, hey, what is the difference between DevOps and SRE? So and my view on this is that SRE, in fact, it complements ITIL-based, practices and the guidelines. Because if you look at ITIL V4 incident management process, they introduce more customer journey as a concept. And the way I see SRE, essentially, defining the pragmatic framework to execute, and also all the way to, in fact, avoid incident to happen.
Yeah.
With it, the chaos engineering concepts, building resiliency, a resilient architecture. So I think it just goes hand in hand to essentially improve stability, avoid those incidents, and if it does happen, it dovetails nicely, how to manage it on an ongoing basis. So I really don't see as a conflict, but just wanted to hear anything you have heard in the market.
Well, it's interesting, and I'll get to, I'm going to ask you a question in a moment myself, but I did want to, I agree with you on that point. I know you can argue, well, SRE, it may be an ITIL. It's not a complete replacement for ITIL. We're not shifting overnight, right? So I think organizations and enterprises are going to have to maintain a foot in both camps, right? And for example, I mean, we've made the point that there's different kinds of SRE kinds of teaming structures, and sometimes people tend to think of SRE and try to portray it as an incident management equivalent, right, to the well-known ITIL process, but it's really not, right? So it's a little different in that regard. So I do agree that there isn't necessarily an inherent conflict unless one is really created by the forces of inertia, right, and the dictates of change management, and we'll get into that. But
Mhm.
one of the things I wanted to ask you was I've heard a lot about this, right? The idea that the service companies can come in and, let's say, work with clients in the context of managed service delivery, and help them or help embrace SRE concepts and principles, but it's got to be a two-way street. And I'm just curious, what are you seeing from the standpoint of how do you engage and team with your customers in this kind of world, and what are some of the options they should look for?
Yeah, no, great question. See, the way we see enterprise customers, they get intrigued. If you go to financial services, even technology, product-centric companies, they're all adopting SREs for the speed of innovation. And when they reach out to us, some customer, they say, "Hey, look, I have the foundation for it. Can you get in and review my SRE processes, the tooling, automation, and tell me what incremental value you can add?" So that is one segment of customer. I would say that they are in early stages of SRE. And what we typically do is, since it is a cultural change, as we all know, right? It's not about bringing an additional tool. We kind of find experience and call them experienced SRE experts and call them the evangelists who are evangelizing SRE as a culture, because it has to kind of change the way things have been done historically, right? From a developer writing a code with stable outcome, then operations team being careful about the error budgets end to end. So I think we see this model of bringing SRE evangelists and embedded with customer teams. The second model is that a lot of customers who may have used some service providers to run operations, what we recommend them to essentially take control of all the architecture, underlying tools, automation. Essentially, let the brain continue with you, essentially, right? Don't outsource or out task the brain. And what it means is that we can advise them how to enhance the foundation, but retain control. And after that, then it's a matter of adding more SRE practitioners, and essentially training their existing team members to follow the SRE best practices, right? So that's kind of how we see it. We don't want to come very prescriptive. We want to kind of have people grow and realize the benefit of SRE themselves for better adoption. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree with you on that because we would probably recommend, if there is it doesn't really, can you outsource SRE? It's kind of a nonsensical question, right? And it's something people shouldn't really think of. Yes, you can certainly bring SRE into your outsourced service context, right? And you can use service providers and outsourcers to help you on the journey towards SRE, but it's not something you leave entirely, as is probably generally true in outsourcing,
Mhm.
that people should retain some semblance of control. And I suppose
Oh
it's
yeah.
true in this regard as well. But one other thing, I know you mentioned this, and I guess culture, right? You mentioned that it's a big challenge, and I guess like anything, that cultural change is difficult to achieve at scale. I mean, I think you need some organizational management. I mean, organizational change management, I should say. You talked about some of the toolings. I was just wondering, do you have any other, in your experience, are there any other significant challenges to SRE adoption in the enterprise? And what are some of the problems you're seeing?
Yeah, so the number one problem we see is that, hey, look, you go and tell that, yeah, let's say observability, right? That, do you have the right tools? Do you measure your service levels with the concept of full SLO, SLI? And customers say, hey, look, I have been able to maintain my system uptime. So they continue to see, in silos, that my servers have been up 5 nines, my application, subsection of an application is up 5 nines, but they don't see an end-to-end customer journey. So
Right.
that's the first challenge, to break the silos, and take a external outside in view. And that's where the cultural element come in, that, hey, look, it's not about finding fault in what you have done. It's more about taking more of a business view of this, right? If you have to increase the velocity of release, then you have to look at the entire life cycle, right from writing the code to release to stability and the performance. So that's kind of one. Then the second thing is that a lot of affinity to what people have done in terms of technology selection, the processes they have been following. So detaching themselves from the technology, or the tools, I think that's another thing. And the third thing is that the training part of it, that how do we train existing workforce to follow these principles? Because it brings more accountability in the value chain, right? Everybody is working against an error budget, and it drives different behavior. So education about, hey, look, what is the end goal? How you are playing as a critical, I would say, link in this value chain. I think
Yeah.
if you address those, then people align, essentially.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess one of the things that I've seen in managed services in general has been the adoption of I guess the new atomic structures in terms of service delivery, right? Instead of classical staff aug,
Mhm.
people think in terms of teams, right? In many cases, like a product team, platform team, and whatnot. This is an ongoing
Mhm.
transition, of course. But I'm curious,
Mhm.
like, if you were to say, like, I found it though, in many cases, people may feel like, okay, I'll drop in an SRE member into my team, through a staff aug, or perhaps maybe I'll outsource an entire SRE team to work alongside my own product or platform team. So have you seen any best practices in this area that you would tend to recommend?
Yes, I think the best way I've seen this is not to outsource the entire, don't consider this to be a function to outsource. I think it's about, bringing this whole cultural change by, getting some people who have done this and seen success with this, right?
Yeah.
uh, and that's how you remove the entry barrier or adoption barriers. So I think you should, you know get the right people, embed them as part of your team, and then make the changes. I would say it's a little bit of a slower process for better adoption and sustainability than carving out that, hey, look, I want somebody to come in and just do SRE as a project. Yeah, but be careful of how you engage a provider for acceptability within your team.
Yeah, I guess that's true. That whole issue of culture is really important. But I have to say, we didn't
Mhm.
ask our clients, we didn't ask the participants to about SRE specifically. Now, we didn't lead the witness, but many of them came back with very, very significant observations about how significant it is becoming in their outsourced delivery of managed cloud services. And again, broadly defined, right, as we've established. So it's really quite striking. And I
Yeah,
guess, as you suggest, I mean, people should obviously they have various reasons for selecting service providers, and maybe experience and knowledge with SRE could be one of their criteria. But I guess at the end of the day, they need to be, let's say, comfortable in the balance of capabilities that a supplier has and can bring to the table. So,
yeah,
uh, but it's surprising to me and extremely interesting to me as an analyst to see this happen. Uh,
yeah,
and
yeah.
we'll see. I think we'll see more of it.
Yeah, no, like, just on this, just to add on that, for example, some organizations, in their rush to adopt, SRE, they don't pay attention on fixing the foundation, if you will, right? So
Yeah.
service providers, can help bring some of those best practices in fixing, your automation gaps, your observability gaps, some of the process templates which have been used in their engagement. So I think that could be a good accelerator. And then the people part come in terms of evangelists I talked about earlier. So there is value in kind of adopting some of the best practices and tooling and automation maturity, working with service provider.
Yeah, no, I definitely would agree with that. I know in our research, we've seen a big impact or a big, uh, let's say, trend towards, I guess what you could say Mark Andreessen had been predicting some years ago, right? That software will eat the world. And so many enterprises are, I guess, thrust into the position where they really need to be experts in software delivery in order to, let's say, maintain the position that they have in business or to enhance it. And I'm just wondering, what is the role of SRE in your mind in this massive transition?
No, that's a great question, Bill. See, software is becoming a differentiator for enterprises, right? And what it really means is that your ability to roll out functions and features at a rapid pace means better customer satisfaction, and of course better stickiness and more revenue. And with that comes this whole challenge that, hey, how do I balance the speed of release with the stability, right? I don't want to release, and in fact, even the well-known social media platforms, whose release velocity is so high, even they face challenges in rolling out function features with stable code. And that's where SRE really fits in. That how do I ensure, right from the quality of code to the release and post-release, availability is maintained very tightly, right? And that gives confidence to developers and the business that I can go at the speed I want. There is no constraint. I think that's truly a big enabler for businesses to be successful. That I can roll out function at the will. So that's truly, I would say, a direct correlation between revenue, customer satisfaction with the maturity of SRE.
Yeah, we're seeing that too. I think that's that ability of enterprises that can truly, let's say, be modern and future fit, as we call it. We certainly are those that tend to be doing better in the market from the standpoint of growth and valuation. So yeah, and I definitely agree with what you're saying.
So what kind of benefits you're observing with these enterprises?
Well, I think that yeah, it's still, well, it depends on who you talk to. It's still it's still a very much an ongoing transition. But I think that customers find a sense of greater control in the cloud environment and in cloud operations. Now, I know that, of course, in the cloud, the focus seems to shift more and more to availability, reliability, and as opposed to maybe response resolution, to a degree, arguably, and the any increase in reliability incident, let's say prevention, right, is to be valued. And I think that companies and again, this is part of a multifaceted transition, right, in terms of tremendous advances in automation, chatbots, AI ops, and so forth, but really helping to achieve that end-to-end view that we talked about. It's one of the big obstacles, really, I find, or at least one of the big challenges that enterprises have as they move into the cloud. And I think, embracing these principles, whether in conjunction with a service provider or not, can really help them feel more comfortable in their ability to do that. So I think that's part of what we're seeing. But of course, as I said, as we've said, it's not necessarily something easy to adopt overnight at scale, right? As we've seen with DevOps and other notable modern advances in software engineering.
Sure. No, I agree. In fact, and on a lighter note, I was talking to one of my friends who has had this experience of driving the EV, Tesla, and I was asking, hey man, when was the last time you went to dealership? He said that I don't go to dealership unless something really breaks. There is no concept of every 3 months preventive maintenance. It just runs, right? And it just struck that how this industry really evolved, to bring so much of stability, and it just runs. There is some parallel to what we are discussing here in terms of SRE for better stability, self-help, self-healing.
I agree with you. I think, and it may not seem as far-fetched when you think about it, as it may initially seem to some of our listeners. But I mean, I think it is indicative of a fundamental mind shift in software engineering, right? And certainly the idea that, yeah, let's have software that just runs, right? Sure, there are going to be cases where incidents will occur, but to the more that we can eliminate them and prevent having to go to the shop, so to speak, that's certainly in line with what enterprises want to see in their digital transformation, right? Solutions that are highly available and can enable that increase in agility and velocity that they're seeking. So yeah, I think it's an apt analogy at the end of the day.
Great. Yeah, no, thanks, Bill. I think it was great talking to you. Getting some of the views what you are hearing on the ground. And we hope that our customers, they see value in adopting SRE's principles for better stability, resiliency, and essentially to accelerate their digital transformation. So thanks again for your time.
Well, thank you, AJ. It's been a pleasure.